I'm on the floor of the Florida Senate with Senate President Andy Gardiner and House Speaker Steve Crisafulli. Mr. President, thanks for hosting us here.
Welcome to the Senate.
Your friends. Speaker, he's your senator. We've heard that before. That's pretty interesting. Do you ever lobby him to do something for you as
sure,
your senator?
He's my senator. He needs to represent me on every occasion.
You're going to be lobbying him a lot.
We joke around a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so.
we do.
You're also presiding officers, and the Constitution builds into the process the opportunity for the two bodies to have differing approaches and similar approaches to things. Sometimes there will be differences, and the two of you will have to use your friendship and so forth to work out differences. How do you see that interaction occurring positively to work out differences? Start with you, Mr. President.
Well, having a friendship, and the Speaker and I have known each other long before we got into these positions, and I think it's very helpful. He obviously, the Speaker will be a strong advocate for the House position, and I'll be a strong advocate for Senate positions on many things. But having that friendship and that ability, I think we have very similar personalities that everything can be worked out, and you don't take anything personal. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some, and at the end of the day, we just, hopefully everybody's proud of the product that we're able to work together to make happen.
Mr. Speaker, the pressures that come with being a presiding officer are several. What is something that is very important to you when as you're going through your term as Speaker, you hope you get to the end of it that people will say, well, Speaker Crisafulli was blank. How would you fill in that blank?
I think he always kept his word, and his integrity is still in place. And you know, for me, it's about being able to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and know that I was always true to who I was and always true to my principles. And I think to me that's important. Obviously, there will be a lot of pressures along the way, but you know, while you're going through those pressures, that's something you always have to keep in mind.
What are your thoughts about getting the 2015 session off to a productive start?
Well, the Speaker and I have put together sort of a joint agenda that allows us to really kind of map out 5 different areas that are important to us. You know, some of them fit very well with what the governor's put forward on tax relief and school accountability and performance funding. That really helps us start the process. The reality is there'll be another 2,000 bills that will be filed, and every member will have the right to argue and try to get that done. But for us, to have that joint agenda, that is really the success. That's when you walk out of here and you know you really accomplished some really good things across the board. So that's for us, or at least for me, that will be a lot of the focus over the next 60 days.
Well, let's say that you get going, and I know you have this work plan 2015, 5 parts of it. Let's suppose it gets bogged down. What will you do about that?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that we didn't just decide this overnight what these issues were.
Can you tell, that's what I was getting to. How did you decide these 5 issues?
Well, it was, you know, each of us kind of put some ideas on the table, and ironically, I think, you know, a lot of the ideas matched up from the beginning. Right. You know, conceptually, we agree on a lot of these things. Obviously, there's the mechanics and the fine tuning of them that, you know, we'll work through the committee process and out of each respective chamber, but ultimately, as the President said, we kind of see this world through the same lens, and I think that is an important hurdle to clear first and foremost when you're trying to work together on an agenda.
And if I could, I would just add to that, to the Speaker's point. If you go back and look at our comments over the last year and a half, 2 years, before we even said let's do a joint agenda, it was pretty consistent with what the joint agenda is, and some of it's being driven by outside forces like Amendment 1, some of these other things, but you know, I'm honored to serve with the first Speaker of Brevard County, and somebody with an ag background and the understanding of natural resources. Why would I not want to have that part of the joint agenda where we can have really an overall water policy? It's just a great opportunity for our state.
Well, let's get to that, okay? That was not the first listed. Tax cuts were, and we'll come back to tax cuts. But let's talk about water. The first constitutional amendment set aside dock step money over the next 20 years, 33% of it. That generates hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even billions. And that's got to be spent some way. And there are environmentalists that say, well, the constitutional amendment tells everybody how to spend it, but Mr. Crisafulli, let me start with you, Speaker. It's not that simple, is it? I mean, you've got, what is your responsibility as the legislature to, what is your responsibility to do with that constitutional amendment and that money?
Well, you know, first of all, to understand that the water issue with regard to, you know, our work plan as a policy piece as well as the implementation of Amendment 1. Speaking to Amendment 1 and the implementation of Amendment 1 is recognizing that, you know, the overall scope of that amendment was really about the acquisition and maintenance of land and water. And, you know, there's no secret that we have made a strong commitment over the last several years to fund environmental programs throughout the state since the, you know, budget started making its way back. And, you know, truth be told, and you know, it's out there as far as the numbers that we've spent and been consistent in spending. And Amendment 1 money is far less than what, you know, our commitment has been in the past. So now we have to grapple with a budget situation of understanding we're going to have to take some GR or, you know, conversations of some trust fund money from other areas to backfill, you know, some of these holes to, you know, stay consistent with the commitment that we have made through the respective chambers.
So in actuality, when that dock stamp revenue is taken away or taken from the process to dedicate to this other issue, you will be looking to fill some holes, right?
Sure.
It has to be managed.
Sure, absolutely.
So, Mr. President, with that in mind, what do you favor as a process to deal with that?
Well, we've already kind of started the building the foundation or the structure of Amendment 1. Senator Charlie Dean has really been a leader on this. Essentially, we are eliminating certain trust funds to create a new land acquisition trust fund. And we've done that in cooperation working with our friends in the House. We think it's very important that the voters can track every dollar that goes into that trust fund and where it goes. So at the end of the 20 years, the voters can say, yes, this is what we got for the Land Amendment 1. Now, as we have been saying and Senator Dean has been saying, we are not getting into distribution discussions yet, or that's the appropriations process. But you've got to lay that foundation, and that's really kind of what we're doing right now. And each chamber obviously will have some different ideas as to how you do that and what should be included and what shouldn't. But I think we have to just kind of let the process work. But at the end of the day, that transparency, the accountability is just key to making sure Amendment 1 is done right.
Mr. Speaker, do you anticipate that in a way, no matter what you do with this, that you're likely to be in court when it's all over? I mean, it's a big issue. That may be a kind of a pessimistic kind of question, but it's a big issue, a lot of money. What do you think?
Well, it's the unfortunate reality that sometimes those things do take place, and let's face it, there's people that get paid to, you know, go challenge these things. So, so there's always that possibility. But, you know, our hope is that we have a process that's, again, open and transparent and you know, goes through what any other issue may go through, and that's with regard to a committee process that vets this.
Well, what would either one of you like to see? Just a couple of things that would come out of this that would really be positive for the state. Either one of you.
Well, again, you empower the chairs of the committees and your leadership team to kind of come up with that. The big issue, again, for me is to be able to really track the revenues and not commingle it in various things like that. Certainly, we have some issues that are important to us. Bike trails is one. We've also talked a lot about land management and access to property, and we've asked our staff to say, look, let's not just look at how much more land can be bought, but how much do we own? You know, what's our inventory, and do the taxpayers of this great state have access to that property? And could you do parks, could you do trails, still be sensitive land? And so those are some of the things that as you get deeper into the implementation of Amendment 1, that you can really start talking about. The problem, not a problem, but a good thing, we're being very deliberative, slow on the creation of the foundation, and then we'll get into all the, where we could potentially do something.
Mr. Speaker, you made a comment in I think in a different context about Everglades land purchase or whatever, where you said something like we don't need any more land, but I think it was in a different context. But the president was saying we need to know what land we own. What's your comment there?
Well, ironically, both of us have said this without ever talking about it with each other. It's, I'm a believer that the state owns a lot of land through Preservation 2000, Florida Forever, but we've done an awful job of managing the land that we have. And I would like to see more emphasis, first and foremost, on the management of the land that we have and whether it's public access. I think government is all too often, interested in buying properties, but leave it to be taken over by invasives and fence it off so that the taxpayers can't access it. And I just don't think that's right. So I think, our first obligation is to take care of what we have and be good stewards.
All right, one quick question before break. The number by the top level, highest priority maybe was cutting taxes. Mr. President, can you speak to that? How much you're going to have to be able to cut taxes, and have you kind of lined up priorities yet?
We have not lined up priorities. I think the Speaker and I on our joint agenda, we just have a fundamental belief that it's better for the taxpayer to have the money than government, and the more you can put back into their pockets to go out and spend, it just generates more opportunities and revenue. But we've been pretty clear, at least on our side especially, not to put a number on what that ultimately would be, how much it would be, or what it would be, where you would cut the taxes, but it should be broad-based. But you allow the members to bring forward their ideas and you see what bubbles up. There's going to be probably 100 different ideas of tax cuts, but you empower the chair to make that decision, and we'll see what the final number is. I don't think we really have an idea of what that's going to be, just kind of let it happen.
Have you got any recent economic forecast to give you some idea of what you're looking at in terms of revenue?
Honestly, in the same posture as the Senate. I've given my chair the flexibility to vet these issues. Certainly broad-based and meaningful is most important to us. We have a governor that has put out his proposal, and we're looking at those alternatives as well. But for us, it's about making sure that we have the committee process in place to have that conversation.
Thank you. We'll go to break and come back.